Hi, Joe. Thanks for having us here today. I just wanted to quickly present our team from Bright Ideas who will be presenting to you today. First, my name is Noah Jacobs. We have Brooklyn Brooks with us, Brian Mixon, Aaron Peoples, and Matthew White. What we want to discuss with you today is first on our agenda is to review our business problem. Second, we want to talk about an overview of the concepts that we'll be discussing. Third, review the current challenges that your team, the Force Group, is facing and propose solutions for each of the 5 dysfunctions of teams. And then lastly, provide a summary of what we've discussed today. When we talked a few weeks ago, we interviewed you and we talked about different business problems that you were facing at the Force Group. And the first problem you mentioned was a lack of focus and commitment amongst team members at your company. The second was a relationship and conflict issues amongst the team members. And then the third thing was a generational resentment between the older team members and the younger team members, those who are more seasoned and those who are newer to the company. So our solutions today are going to talk about those 3 problems. I'll pass it off to Aaron to present the overview of concepts.
So here's a brief overview of the concepts you learned from the materials we asked you to read. First, we asked you and your team to complete the 5 fundamentals team assessment, which you did, and this helped us assess where you are. Your team scored low in each of the 5 areas, with sometimes being the most frequent response. You might have noticed that the 5 fundamentals from the assessment are exactly the opposite of the 5 dysfunctions of a team, which you read. As a refresher, the 5 fundamentals are trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and results. You'll recall from the book, Do You Care to Lead, the acronym SONIC: service, open up, nurture, inspire, and commit. As we go through our presentation, we will be touching on a lot of these areas. Now let us begin. I'll be presenting on the dysfunction of absence of trust. Joe, you asked for a magic wand, and this is it: trust. It lies at the heart of a functioning, cohesive team, and without it, teamwork is all but impossible. Current challenges of your team in this area include the lack of necessary levels of openness and vulnerability. This trust, Joe, begins with you. As the leader, you must demonstrate being vulnerable, admitting your mistakes and incompetence. But even before demonstrating these, you need to lead out with service. As you mentioned, you care about the members of your team and you aren't afraid to reward them. This is great, but you need to put this caring into action. You read the book we recommended, Do You Care to Lead? And the first step in it is to serve those you lead. Look for opportunities to serve your team. They're everywhere. And ask the superpower question, what can I do to ease your burden? You must listen carefully for the little things that aren't being said by the members of your team. And then you must act on what you've observed, received, and heard. Next, Joe, you must be vulnerable. Open up and share about yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, and your shortcomings. Do this during one-on-ones and during your team meetings. Let your team see the real you and not just what you want them to see. Which brings me to your Leadership 360. This piece of information is essential and gives you the perfect opportunity to model what being vulnerable means. Go over it with your team, ask for specifics and feedback, especially with the things you don't agree with. Take notes and take action. And most importantly, don't be defensive. As you do these, the vulnerability and trust will start to flow downward to each member of the team. But this isn't enough. They must build it within themselves and as a team. You all need to create psychological safety. There's a lot of the he, she, they going on. This doesn't help build that safety. You do this by asking a lot of questions, being curious with each other. And Joe, the more you ask questions of the team, the more they'll catch on and begin asking their own questions. We recommend that you do the personal histories exercise as a team. Description of this is found at the back of the 5 dysfunctions of a team. This specific exercise allows everyone the opportunity to open up, share a little, watch and listen as their teammates do the same. With this exercise, it's a great time to ask questions and be curious afterwards with each other. You said that some members of your team, their kids are on the same sports teams, and that's great. But this kind of bond needs to be on with all the members of the team, not just a few. Lastly, your team needs to create team norms. It doesn't need to be a lengthy list of things, just 3 or 4 strong ground rules. As you might recall, Catherine had 2 on her team. Develop these together as a team and review them at the beginning of each meeting. Also, you need to hold each other accountable and sticking to them. This is also based on trust and creates more trust when someone calls someone out for not sticking to them. Building trust takes time and doesn't just happen overnight. And it's up to you, Joe, to set the right conditions in order for this to happen. Now I turn the time over to Brian for his next dysfunction.
Hey, Joe. I'll be focusing on the fear of conflict within your team and how it's impacting your team's culture. We'll also walk you through our game plan to overcome these issues. Your team is currently avoiding conflict and struggling through conversations. This leads to indirect communication where team members feel unheard, resulting in disengagement and unresolved issues. As you've mentioned, Joe, sometimes I feel like people hold back what they really think to avoid stirring the pot. This behavior is a clear indicator of fear of conflict, which can have negative impacts on the team. To address this, it's crucial to create an environment where open dialogue is encouraged. This means creating a space where team members feel safe to voice their concerns without the fear of repercussions. We recommend you implement a round robin discussion format during team meetings. This method ensures that every team member has an opportunity to speak and share their thoughts, encouraging a more open discussion. Show your team that their input is valued by actively listening to what they have to say. By ensuring everyone's voice is heard, you can foster a culture of collaboration. We want you to understand how important you are as a leader, Joe. You play a pivotal role in shaping how conflict is perceived within your team. Embracing conflict and demonstrating how to handle it will encourage the team to do the same. We want you to implement regular feedback sessions. This can help address some issues early on and create conflicts from escalating. We recommend using the start, stop, continue framework for this feedback session. This is something we've had success using with our other clients and feel it's a great way to get the ball rolling. Here's an explanation. Create an anonymous email survey that asks the following questions. What should the team or individual start doing that could improve performance or team dynamics today? What should the team or individual stop doing because it's not effective or is counterproductive? What is working well that could be continued or even expanded? We know creating constructive conflict can be difficult, and so we recommend equipping your team with the skills needed to manage the conflict effectively. To do this, we recommend hosting a conflict norms workshop. In this workshop, you'll explain why healthy conflict is important. With the help of your team, you will establish clear ground rules. Doing this ensures conflict will remain constructive rather than critical. Next, you'll work through a couple of conflict scenarios with role playing. We have a mock up of a few scenarios we'd be happy to share with you after our meeting today. It's important that you lead by example here, Joe, and adhere to the norms agreed upon by the group. By embracing and addressing fear of conflict head on, you can transform your team's culture and elevate their performance. Now, I'd like to turn the time over to my colleague Noah, who will continue with the next part of our presentation.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, Joe. I will be talking about lack of commitment today. And as our team was reviewing your team assessment report, one note stood out to us. It said in the report that during discussions, team members challenge one another about how they arrived at their conclusions and at their opinions. And this is great. This is where we want the team to be, but we want to take that even further. And what we're going to propose today is to build off of that. In the words of Patrick Lencioni, he says, disagree, but commit. So as Brian talked about not having fear of conflict, we want this team to continue to come together, to arrive at conclusions and opinions, even if they disagree, but that they can commit to. So to start, the current challenges that we see that your team is facing is the first, meetings are prolonged until consensus is arrived. The important thing to understand is that consensus is not commitment and consensus is not agreement. And the longer you have meetings, the more people are just going to want to agree, so the meeting will end, but they're not actually committed to the idea. They're not committed to the goal, and whatever's happening at the company is going to fail because everyone isn't committed. Secondly, there seems to be a disconnect between the goal alignment at the company and the communication of those goals to the broader teams. So in order to overcome these challenges, we offer the following solutions. First, buy-in from team members is essential, critical, and important. All team members need to buy in. They need to be able to share their viewpoints. They need to be able to share their thoughts. But at the end of the day, if everyone has buy-in, if everyone can share and their goals heard, even if they don't love the solution at the end, they can still commit to it and see it through to the end and successful completion because they had buy-in. Secondly, there must be clarity around all decisions. Everyone needs to know what the goals are clearly so that they can commit to the outcome. And lastly, in order just to increase commitment overall for your team, timeliness of meetings is critical. If you have a meeting, have an agenda with that meeting. Stick to that agenda and the time allotted to that meeting. If it's time to move on to another topic, table the discussion, move on to the next topic, and come back at another team meeting to discuss any open items. If there is an open item that is critical and needs to be resolved before the next team meeting, set up a separate meeting where you guys can come together and discuss, have buy-in, and then commit to a decision. The second is to create a thematic goal, which Matthew is going to talk about a little bit later on in our presentation. And third, have cascading and transparent communication from the top to the bottom so everyone throughout the organization knows what their part is in order for the successful completion of a project or task. With that, I will pass it off to Brooklyn to talk about avoidance of accountability.
Thanks, Noah. So yeah, this nexus function is the avoidance of accountability, and it builds directly off that commitment that Noah just talked about. It's important, Joe, that you as a leader are not the only one holding your team accountable. It's not effective. What is effective, however, is peer-to-peer accountability. When team members are held accountable by other team members, it can be incredibly powerful. And when you can master that peer-to-peer accountability on your team, you will have reached what we like to call the nirvana of teamwork. You had mentioned in our last meeting a few of the challenges that you're facing, which were that team members were missing deadlines, like they're not doing what they say they're going to do. They're not holding each other accountable out of fear of the reaction of other team members. And you also mentioned that you're currently only implementing individual rewards. So in order to overcome some of these challenges, we've developed a few really simple but effective solutions that you can begin implementing right now. The first thing we want to recommend is clarifying and displaying your goals and standards for your team. This is so simple, but it's a really great way for team members to hold one another accountable because they are aware of the expectations of each other. So after you've clarified and displayed those goals and standards, it's really important that you keep these out in the open so they can't be ignored or forgotten about. The next thing we recommend is consistently incorporating what's called the team effectiveness exercise. So Joe, we'll practice this exercise with you so you can see how it plays out, but essentially it requires everyone to give feedback in terms of strengths of each team member and the thing that each team member does that hurts the team. So it may be uncomfortable at first, but we are really confident that implementing this on a consistent basis will allow your team to gain a lot of constructive and valuable information, and as a result, become more efficient and effective. The last thing we want to recommend is incorporating more team rewards. Now, you've mentioned, Joe, that you implement a lot of individual rewards, but team rewards can be a very powerful way of improving accountability. You might recall that Lencioni stated in his book that peer pressure is the most effective and efficient means of maintaining high standards of performance on a team. And it's because team members really aren't likely to just stand by and watch as others don't pull their weight. So implementing team rewards will entice your team, will motivate them to hold each other accountable to reach that common goal. And we can give you some ideas of some effective team rewards if you need help in that area. But Joe, implementing these recommendations will improve your team accountability and make your job as a leader much easier. And having that established accountability also makes overcoming the next dysfunction easier as well. So I'll turn the time over to Matthew to discuss that.
Hey, Joe. So we've reached the top of the pyramid, and this kind of ties everything together. So we're going to hear a couple of things that sort of sound familiar. But the last dysfunction is inattention to results. Now, you mentioned a couple times that your goal as a company is profit. Obviously, profit is very important. Every company has to have profit. The problem is it's an ambiguous goal. Goals, especially the ones that really help you, they need to be very specific. You need to know when you're attaining it, and you need to set a time frame for when you want to attain that goal. So we need to basically have your team get together and decide what is the actual goal that we have. Maybe you want to be the fastest growing insurance group in your area, something like that. You need to decide what matters for you. And as we mentioned, you need to have rewards for meeting these goals. Whatever actually helps people, do their thing. Some people want money. Some people may want a trip. You need to figure out what your team wants. And then once you've got the overarching goal, you want to break it down into what we've got here with supporting objectives. These are all individual goals that will build together to make it so you can achieve that final thematic goal. And you need to track those. You need to have what we call a scoreboard. Now, we use this image of a dartboard. Obviously, right down in the middle, we've got the bullseye. And that means you're doing everything that you want, and you can't meet that goal any better than you are right now. Obviously, there's other numbers, and you can kind of go through and see what are we doing well, what do we need to do a little bit better. And this needs to be, as we mentioned, displayed prominently. We need to know what our goals are and how we are meeting them. Every single meeting that you have, you need to go over what the goals are and how you're meeting them. So, Joe, we've given you a bunch of different ideas here. There are 5 dysfunctions, and we've given you a lot of solutions for them. These dysfunctions, they're proven to hurt teams, and when you address them, it's proven to help teams. If you take these suggestions and apply them, and you set the example, your team will absolutely start to improve. We'll just leave you this, we're in this together. We're happy to help you. We are around if you do need anything else from us. But thank you for your time, and good luck with all of this.